You open your phone for no particular reason. Maybe you are waiting for something, or avoiding something, or just filling a quiet moment. And then it starts. Someone you went to school with is standing in front of a house they just bought. Someone else is on a beach that looks like it was designed specifically to make you feel the weight of your own ordinary Tuesday. A former colleague just got a promotion. A stranger you followed months ago for a recipe now seems to have built an entire beautiful life while you were not looking. You put the phone down, and the room feels different than it did before you picked it up. That feeling, that quiet, uncomfortable shrinking, is what we are going to talk about today. Not to make you feel worse about it, and not to give you a simple fix, but to help you understand what is actually happening inside you when that feeling arrives, because understanding it is the first step to not being ruled by it. The first thing worth knowing is that this is not a character flaw. The tendency to measure yourself against others is one of the oldest features of human psychology. Alfred Adler, one of the most important psychologists of the 20th century, spent much of his life studying what he called the inferiority feeling. His insight was not that some people feel inferior and others do not. His insight was that the feeling of falling short is nearly universal, and that what separates people is not whether they feel it, but what they do with it. Adler believed that human beings are deeply social creatures who are always, in some part of their minds, asking, where do I stand? Am I contributing? Am I capable? Am I enough? These are not vanity questions. They are survival questions that evolution built into us long before social media existed. The problem is that those ancient instincts were never designed for a world where you can, in a single afternoon, compare yourself to thousands of people simultaneously, all of whom are presenting only their most polished moments. This is the trap that social media comparison sets. It is not a fair comparison. It never was. You are measuring your interior, your doubts, your mess, your unfinished plans, your 3 a.m. worries against someone else's exterior. Their highlight reel against your behind-the-scenes footage. And of course, you come up short. Anyone would. But knowing that intellectually does not always stop the feeling. And that is because the feeling is not really about the other person at all. Here is what is often happening beneath the surface. When you see someone else's life and feel that ache, what you are usually encountering is not envy in the simple sense of wanting what they have. What you are often encountering is a signal that somewhere inside you, there is something you want for yourself that you have not yet moved toward. The ache is not a verdict, it is a compass, it is pointing at something. James Allen, writing more than a century ago, observed that the mind is like a garden. What you tend grows, what you neglect withers, and what you allow to take root without examination can quietly shape everything. When you spend hours watching other people's curated lives, you are not just passing time. You are tending a particular kind of mental soil, one where your own life is always being measured against an impossible standard, and always found wanting. The hunger for online validation works in a similar way. When your sense of worth becomes tied to how your life looks compared to others, you stop asking what you actually want, and start asking what will look good. You stop building a life, and start performing one. And the painful irony is that the more you perform, the emptier the performance feels, and the more you need external confirmation that it is working. This is what Friedrich Nietzsche, in his profound and often misunderstood work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, was pointing at when he wrote about the danger of living according to values you have inherited, rather than values you have chosen. He was not being cold or elitist. He was being honest about something deeply human, that it is entirely possible to spend years chasing a version of success that was never really yours to begin with, that you can exhaust yourself climbing a ladder that is leaning against the wrong wall because the wall looked impressive from the outside. Nietzsche's idea of self-overcoming is not about becoming harder or more ruthless. It is about the quiet, courageous act of asking, what do I actually value? Not what looks good, not what gets approval, what genuinely matters to me when no one is watching. That question is uncomfortable, and that discomfort is worth sitting with, because it is one of the most honest conversations you can have with yourself. FOMO, the fear of missing out, is often described as a fear of missing events or experiences. But at its deeper level, FOMO is rarely about the party you were not invited to, or the trip you could not afford. It is about a fear of being left behind in life itself. A fear that while you are standing still, everyone else is moving forward, and that the gap between you and them is growing in some way that cannot be recovered. That fear is real, but it is also, in most cases, built on a distortion. Because life is not a race with a single track. The person whose house you are envying may be quietly devastated by something you cannot see. The person on the beach may be running from something. The colleague with the promotion may be working 80 hours a week and wondering if it was worth it. This is not to say their lives are secretly miserable. That would be its own kind of distortion. It is to say that you are seeing a fragment, and your mind is constructing a whole story from it. Adler would say that the antidote to comparison anxiety is not to stop caring about where you stand, but to redirect that energy. Instead of asking how you measure up to others, ask how you are measuring up to your own potential. Instead of asking whether your life looks as good as theirs, ask whether your life is moving in a direction that feels genuinely meaningful to you. That shift from external comparison to internal direction is not easy. It requires something that our culture does not always celebrate: solitude. Not isolation, but the kind of quiet time where you are not performing for anyone, not consuming anyone else's narrative, just sitting with your own thoughts long enough to hear what they are actually saying. Nietzsche wrote about solitude not as loneliness, but as a kind of workshop, a place where you can strip away the noise and figure out what you are actually building. In that sense, the discomfort you feel after scrolling is not something to be numbed or scrolled away. It is an invitation. An invitation to turn inward and ask what it is you are really looking for. James Allen would add that the quality of your inner life determines the quality of your outer experience. Not in a magical thinking sense, but in the very practical sense that what you focus on shapes what you notice, what you pursue, and what you build. If your attention is constantly pulled outward toward other people's lives, your own life becomes a backdrop rather than a story you are actively writing. So what can you actually do with all of this? Start by noticing the feeling without immediately reacting to it. When that ache arrives after scrolling, do not push it away and do not spiral into it. Just notice it. Ask it what it is pointing at. What does it want for you, not from others? Then, gently and without self-punishment, begin to ask what your own values actually are. Not the values you perform online. Not the milestones that look impressive in a caption. The things that, when you are honest with yourself in a quiet moment, actually matter to you. And finally, remember that the life that feels small when you compare it to a curated feed is the same life that, when you are fully present in it, contains more texture, more meaning, and more possibility than any highlight reel could ever capture. Your life is not smaller than theirs. It is just less edited. And that, when you learn to see it clearly, is not a weakness. It is where everything real lives. If this video gave you something to think about, consider sharing it with someone who might need it. And if you want to keep exploring the deeper patterns behind how we think, feel, and relate to ourselves and others, Inside the Labyrinth is here for exactly that. And if this spoke to a part of you that rarely gets heard, stay with that feeling for a moment. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are only beginning to understand yourself. Subscribe to Inside the Labyrinth for more reflections on the hidden patterns of the human mind.